Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Dune Part 2. Now, the last time I reviewed Dune Part 1, but I did promise to rewatch Dune Part 1 before, or pretty soon before, or right before I saw Dune Part 2. And I did that. And I actually like Dune Part 1 a lot more. However, although I do think these are basically one movie, I mean, it's based on the same book and stuff, even though there's that, I still feel like this is a much better part than part one. Although I think they're a complete narrative. I don't think I was completely wrong about Dune in the first Dune, but I was more into it the second time. But this basically leaves where the first film left off. I feel like there was a little bit of a last time on Dune, but not really. You're sort of just like in it, and then, it references things from the other film quite frequently, so there's certain characters, certain things that they don't fully set up, that I'm sure they feel like they don't need to because everyone saw the first one. This is a really good, huge, epic kind of Hollywood movie. Denis Villeneuve made a film that is part like post Nolan, post heavy metal. I guess they're all influenced by Michael Mann. Post Michael Mann, kind of, almost Cecil B. DeMille kind of epic, because like everybody's in this. Like there's this huge, insane cast. The landscapes are ridiculous. Like the set pieces are amazing. It feels like this is what a Hollywood epic is now. But it's also so critical and sort of cynical about how easily we all follow a leader or a messiah, and watching someone whose motivation is to, in fact, use that, and partly thinking, maybe I won't, maybe I don't like being this, maybe I don't, even though if you know the story in the book and all that, you sort of know what he's going to do, and it's fairly obvious what he's going to do. Not that I have a problem with that. I actually quite like that about this film. I thought that was a really, really interesting way to do a narrative of kind of messiah figure, someone who's basically, sort of being absolutely careerist about it most of the time, and I'm fairly obviously using the Fremen to do his bidding, despite the fact that he's like, oh man, I'm getting these visions, I totally don't want to do this. And you're like, I definitely think you want to do this. Like, this is not, you're telling Zendaya one thing, but you're telling your mom a different thing, and it's fairly obvious you're not going to do what Zendaya, but from what Zendaya wants, and like watching the various characters, like seeing something that can be avoided just play out like that. It's like watching someone get addicted to drugs who knew they would get addicted to drugs, and it might, be obvious and you roll your eyes, but at the same time, it's depressing to actually see it all happen. And it's depressing to see things go in the sad direction that you expect them to go, and there's nothing not depressing about that. And I think Dune Part 2 takes on that fairly well as being and smartly showing, the ideas of the rich and powerful, and how power fades and changes, and how the influential people just follow that. It's just very interesting, and almost felt like it's like satirizing any kind of like savior or messiah, or particularly anyone from any sort of means who becomes those people, who becomes someone like Paul Atreides is in this. And you think like, oh no, they're the good one, they're going to do this and do that. It's like the anti Lawrence of Arabia. There's no scene where Paul Atreides is like, no, you can't break up the Middle East into these countries. Paul Atreides would be like, I mean, we could probably just break up the Middle East. I think that'll probably work out for me politically in the end, so I can still be space emperor and stuff. It is very fascinating that it's trippy, it's weird. I very much like this a lot more. And even while I was watching, I was like, man, if I liked Dune Part 1 more the second time, I like this a lot more the second time. Dune Part 2 is about Paul Atreides and his mother, played by Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet, and his mother, played by Rebecca Ferguson, are with the Fremen still after what happened to the House of Atreides. They're hanging out with the Fremen, and he starts a relationship with Chani, played by Zendaya, as he's haunted by these visions he's having, that he will cause like tons of death and horribleness. He's trying to step away from it. He becomes closer to the Fremen, gets the blue eyes because he's doing too many drugs or spice. He's basically going through a Fremen. They believe he's possibly the Messiah, and his mother, who's part of the Bene Gesserit, becomes the kind of other superior or something. And they kind of become incredibly important to the Fremen, and then eventually start to use the Fremen to take back the planet and spice production, and sort of eventually, as he even says in the first one, wants to find a way to marry the Emperor's daughter, played by Florence Pugh. This cast is really crazy, and when I say the Cecil B. DeMille thing, that's not a knock or anything. Like, if you see the Ten Commandments or later like 50 Cecil B. DeMille, it would be like this insane cast, and this is the same way. But the first one, having Christopher Walken back, I keep reading 4 years. I'm not sure what the last thing I saw him in was. I'm assuming it was 4 years ago. I love Christopher Walken. He's a great actor. I know he just does his Christopher Walken voice, which everyone has a problem with, but if he didn't do that voice, that would be weird. So I'm okay with Christopher Walken voice. I liked him as the Emperor. I thought that was a cool idea. He is kind of a weirder actor. I think that would work for him. But Timothée Chalamet, I think, was very good, as well as, like, you could see him go from being like kind of the small desert mouse to the, hugely being a man. Like, I will agree, like, he has a very like boyish quality to him, and towards the end of this he felt very like more like a man, maybe like a misbegotten stupid man, but he was still a man in itself. Well, I don't know if he was stupid. He's very smart, but that's the scary thing about it. Although I will say Zendaya, I think it's Zendaya as Chani, that is maybe the best performance I've ever seen for her. She was really amazing, and the fact that she knows what's going to happen, it's just like really depressing. It's like it reminds me a lot of Diane Keaton's role in the first Godfather, but like knowing that she knows this is fucking bullshit, that he thinks he's the Messiah and stuff, and that they're all following it while she's in love with him, was like that she sells it so well. It is, she's just, I don't know. I really do think this is one of her great performances. I really think she sold a really important part of the movie. I think part of acting, I think I've said this before, is you're telling the story, and she excellently told that part of the story. Without that, you wouldn't have like a major theme of the film, and seeing someone go, this is horrible, this is fucked. Like, I do not like this, and all of my people are going for this, and everyone's just gonna follow him forever, and like I can't stop it, and I know this is bad. And like having that kind of consciousness in the film, I think made it hurt more, because it is like seeing someone you love doing something horrible and no one will listen to it, and she's just like bear witness to the horribleness that's going to be inflicted on all of them. Is just and you can see it all in her face. Just some really great acting from her. I really liked her in this. I think I've never really thought of her as a bad actress or anything, but I thought she did a great performance here. I mean, you have her from Rebecca Ferguson to Josh Brolin to Florence Pugh to Léa Seydoux. Suddenly I was like, okay. Some of them I was like, you guys just like were just anybody big, I guess. Ferguson was actually really good. I think seeing her and Chalamet work together, they were a very good motherly son bond. But Austin Butler, if you had any doubts, I don't think anyone thought he was a bad actor, but like you kind of know the Austin Butler Elvis persona. He's not that. He's playing like very scary, psychopathic kind of character, but the kind you would expect for nowadays, but he just is so good at doing that role. The one thing I will say about it, and look, it's fine. People say this is the Star Wars or whatever, and mostly I think they're blowing smoke, except for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But the thing about this is, and this is my big criticism last time, and it's still a criticism, although I think I've gotten chiller about it, and I think this one works for it. But is that these are such products of their time. And I get that, like any adaptation, although this story of this can be placed on so many different things, like the Paul Atreides could be, everyone from Donald Trump to George W. Bush to Ronald Reagan to Bill Clinton to Obama, anybody, and you could see the spice thing as being obviously oil. I think we all think it's oil. So it's just like you could put it in I'm just using U.S. presidents, but you could put it under so many different situations, so many different huge public figures. All this, it's like an overarching, a great story, because it's probably going to live on for a very long time, because it's very good at like putting your current time in there. I'm sure if I read this during the Iraq War, I'd think one thing, I thought, now and so forth. And I do think, like, obviously when you adapt a story, it's about when you're adapting the story as well as the story you're adapting. And that's very much true here. But the other thing is that, like, this feels so Christopher Nolan. This feels so Michael Mann. This feels so 2024. And my main thing, when people are like, oh, this is like the original Star Wars. It's not. Because Star Wars was not like anything in 1977 until Star Wars hit. One of the things I like about this is when it gets weird, like when Austin Butler's character, who had a weird space name that I can't remember, but he when he's fighting one of the guys in this huge thing, and there's like guards around him, and the guards have these cool like heavy metal magazine kind of illustration masks and stuff. That stuff is amazing, but for the most part, it felt very much like this is what an auteur director in the 2020s, this is how they make the movie. I thought it's very good at that, but I think what doesn't make it break out for me more than that is it's such a part of its time. And I think like that kind of like, I don't know if I love that current style. I think it sort of works within Dune and stuff, but I do think like special effects wise and stuff, to me, it's just like a huge blockbuster movie. It's not necessarily something I don't see like what's going to happen. We're going to get a third cool Dune movie. That's fine. But is it going to change anything in special effects or how things look? No, because it's a follower. It's not a leader, but that's fine. This is the film that's going to follow Paul Atreides. This film is not Paul Atreides. But that's okay. It's still a very good movie. It's very good at following Paul Atreides. You can be good at it. You could be Javier Bardem and die in a ship or something. I don't know how he dies. I didn't read the books. My dad did. I'm sure you can comment below. But and Javier Bardem was great. I do really like this film. I thought it was an amazingly well-told film. I think it was one of the smarter films talking about leadership and the idea of false prophets and the idea of false messiahs or messiahs in general, and the idea of like, we can get you back. See, it's like the Trump thing. We can make everything wonderful again through this fighting. We can defeat them and be the winners and things like that. And that I thought was very scary. I think the other thing about Chalamet is he plays it so much like a politician who knows he's manipulating these people. Like, there was never really a moment, except when he was with Johnny, with Zendaya, that I actually believed he wasn't just using them. I think he liked being a part of it, but I think he always knew. Because he says that to his mom and stuff. I think he always knew what he was doing. And it's like, I think he likes riding the sandworms. I think he likes being a part of them, but I think he ultimately knows this is what I have to do. And that's like dark. It's dark. I mean, it shows like what the rich will ultimately do. They will be your friend. They will hang out with you. They will gain your trust. They will get what they can get from you. But ultimately, they're still rich and they're going to go back to that. Like, even if it's been a couple of years, you're like, no, they're like over this thing, right? He's not going to be Emperor of Space. And, but we should have known, because at the end of part one, he like kind of said that in other, he's like, why are you talking about the Emperor right now? That's fucking weird. Like, why would you bring that up right now? I think this is a very good movie. It's one of the better Hollywood blockbusters I've seen in a bit, and definitely the best one I've seen this year, but there's like none of them. So I do think it is an equally smart and pretty much more deeper film that asks a lot of big questions. I don't know how it adapted and simplified things, but I do think like there are certain people, it's like I don't get the idea of like who Josh Brolin's character, like what music he listens to or something like that. But that's like beside the point. I think it's all just trying to tell the story. It's not necessarily we're getting deeper dives in the characters, things like that, but that's fine. I think it's a very well tight screenplay and tight movie. I think it helps part one. I think part one is the inferior part. This is where all the interesting stuff really happens, but I'm actually down to rewatch part two at some point, maybe if it comes back on Max, because I really enjoy this. I think it's one of Denis Villeneuve's better films. I think it makes his last film, Dune Part 1, even better, and it shows like what he has, how great he is at being a director. I have heard the criticism that he makes the fight sequences look so cool, it sort of undermines the message of the movie, and you're just thinking about how cool the knife fight was and how good the action sequence was or something like that. I agree to a point, but when we get to the point where he does do all the evil stuff, and I don't normally do spoilers like this, but it's like a big movie of a big book, and so it's like at a certain point, what are you doing? I kind of knew all this stuff, so because of my dad, when I was a kid, I watched David Lynch's Dune, his director's kind of the Sci-Fi Channel a lot. To me, it's like the story's been out there, so it's like whatever. I didn't feel it undermined the point of the whole narrative, because it's really cool to watch them, like, stab people suddenly in the sand and like have big explosions, which the explosions in this look better explosions than the last explosions. So that's wonderful. I do like when suddenly people will just like walk off something and like float. That was cool. And like their weird bug helicopters and stuff. I do love all that, and I did think it was cool, but to me it didn't ruin my opinion. I don't think it's media literacy. I do think oftentimes with these big blockbuster movies, like I felt this way about Spider-Verse, I felt this way about even certain ones, it's like if you're anticipating this movie and you're getting wrapped up in the visuals and stuff, if you don't fully read the movie the first time, that's totally cool, by the way. That's totally fine. I don't think you need more media literacy or you're stupid or something. There's a lot going on and a lot to take in. That's just sort of what happens. And I didn't think it undermined the message. I've heard that from people. I'm like, I do understand why people say that, but at a certain point, it's like, I do think, from my limited understanding, I haven't read the Dune books, it's much like how Peter Jackson did Lord of the Rings, where he had to make certain sacrifices and figure out how to make this a movie in 2020s Hollywood, much like how Peter Jackson had to learn in 2000s Hollywood. So it's like you have to figure that out, and I think like you can't just have like the super bummer ending. So you have to have that crazy action sequence, but at the same time, like, I thought it was very clear. I thought it was a very clear narrative. I wasn't like surprised that like, oh man, Paul Atreides kind of sucks, you guys. Like, that's crazy. Our protagonist isn't a good person. It does feel weird in a movie of this size. Like, that kind of protagonist turn feels more of a Scorsese thing than a sci-fi epic, especially nowadays. But I thought it was a really good movie. It made me appreciate Dune. I rewatched Dune 1 before this, and I liked it more. I think it makes you appreciate Denis Villeneuve and like showing, like, I don't know what he's going to do next, but he's really, really great director. I mean, there's no way to sort of deny him after this. This is an achievement, basically, what he did. And if he's going to continue to make Dune movies, I think if he's able to tell a story that largely points the fingers at like any Messiah or anyone like this so publicly, I mean, there's a certain, I actually do think, as silly as it might sound, is like a brand. There's t-shirts and there's the popcorn cup, I referenced it and stuff. He's still pointing that out to a mass audience, and I do think there's a certain wonder in that he can do that and do it as well as he can. I don't think what he did undermined anything, because I do think ultimately where this film ends up and where it goes kind of shows you kind of where, any kind of cultish, fascistic Messiah kind of figure can lead you, and you might go further than you ever really wanted to, and it just rings of how sad it is that we keep doing that in, we're in 2000 right now, in 10,000, that's still going on. It ultimately talks about, how mankind loves to follow, but in this, you kind of see that some of the times you're following and that person's letting you all fall off the cliff for their own gain, which I think is depressing, but you ultimately know the darkness of human nature and where that ultimately will lead us, and lead us in places, from what I hear, they're even darker than we can possibly imagine, making this probably one of the sadder tragedies, because almost everyone involved knows it's going to happen and just lets it happen. And maybe there's nothing more human and more sad that continues to happen and will continue to happen, is something that I don't think we can avoid, and I don't think the ending is something you can avoid ultimately, because the truth of the whole situation, the truth of that kind of leadership, is the false idea that they're leading you to their own self-gain, but not necessarily ever for yours. So if you have seen Dune Part 2 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.